Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the As a Man Thinketh podcast on YouTube. I'm going to do today's a little different than how we've done things in the past. You've probably noticed that this video appeared as a premiere feature, and the reason why I'm doing that is because today I'm going to be active down in the comments with you guys as the video airs, so we could have a little more interaction throughout the video. I have to kind of limit my time, so I'm going to be on here just during the initial video airing, and then I'll try and go back and respond to comments later as I can. I mean, I have a family and a farm to run and other things that I have to do, but I thought it would be a good way to just kind of boost interaction a little bit and improve upon the conversation, especially when you have comments that are rolling in real time and you can actually interact with each other. I do ask that you guys keep it respectful. I know that some of these conversations can tend to get people a little heated, a little emotional sometimes, but it's ultimately important to make sure that we're being respectful of each other, especially in a situation where there's live dialogue going on. For those of you who just listen to this as a podcast, it's still the same format as usual as far as my ideas and what I'm thinking about some of these subjects. That said, there are several subjects I wanted to discuss today. I have a little cheat sheet with me because there have been a lot of different things going on. And what I normally do on this podcast is I like reading the news. I mean, everybody reads the news. It's our way of staying in touch with each other. And over the years, you know, it's gone from a newspaper publication that's circulated by just a few groups to you can get your news from everywhere on the internet. And then it becomes extremely difficult to find, you know, valuable information. And it's become difficult mainly because we've become awoken to the fact that we can get news and perspective from multiple sources. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think we should really embrace that. And then, you know, the commentary that comes from that is something that has always been built through discussions with people like you and I, and understanding, you know, breaking it down and really trying to get past some of the fat and get to the center of it all. So in this video, we're going to discuss several different topics, and I always put the topics down below in a scrollable form. So if you're not interested in all these topics, you could always scroll through and just look at the ones that you want to look at. Today we're going to be talking about carbon passports and ignition cutoff switches, number one. I'm going to go into the UN's new campaign against meat. I'm going to talk a little bit about regional banks, and the reason for that is more or less, you know, recognizing the fact of market consolidation in both the food industry and the capital industry. And then we're going to talk into Lady Rothschild's Pinky in the Brain plan. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just, I'm talking about an organization that started during COVID under her that I disagree with. And I have the right to disagree with their form of capitalism. Unlike them, I'm not going to force you into my belief of capitalism, but I am going to make arguments as to why I disagree with theirs and, you know, maybe try and sell you on mine. You don't have to accept it. Okay, so with that said, the headlines that I've chosen for today is As a Man Thinketh. I read a headline the other day that said it was about carbon passports, and this was an article written by Mark Jeftovic. I don't really know who Mark is, but it starts off with the title, "Experts Suggest Your Standard of Living Will Be Reduced by Over 85%. And this article is based on a report of the future of travel and tourism co-authored by a travel agency called Intrepid Travel and the Future Labs Institute. And these are basically think tanks that put these reports out. You know, it's interesting. I used to not take think tanks very seriously until I did a video several years ago on the future of agriculture and food, the greatest disruption in agriculture. And I'll put a link to it up above because you know, if you go back and you watch that video and you see everything that's transpired since then, I don't know if that was 2017 or 2018. I'm going to have to go back and find it myself. But again, there'll be a link in the description and a link up above there. But the point is that a lot of those things have transpired. And it's because a lot of these think tanks are working with global institutions to kind of push forward a lot of these changes. I don't want to use the word agenda or everybody's going to think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it's a fact. And that's why I'm referencing that older video. I think, these goals that they're putting forward are goals that they intend to push. They intend to use lobbyists, whatever means they can, to reach our lawmakers and push these goals. And so as we move into this world where carbon is the enemy, which is a bit ridiculous because we live in a carbon ecology, you're going to start seeing more and more of these things about your carbon footprint, my carbon footprint, and allowances that we will have as individuals with those carbon footprints. We've already kind of seen the carbon bank scenario kind of initiated with a lot of larger institutions and corporations. And that's because if you want to start making something of value, you need to start where the big movement is, and those are with the big corporations and things. But as this progresses, it's not unreasonable to assume that someday it's going to affect you and I. And this article mainly gets into carbon passports and means of transportation within the airline industry, traveling, the fact that right now we could jump on a plane, go to wherever we want to. People who work remotely can work very remote if they only have to go into an office one day a week and they can afford, heck, right now you can get a plane ticket from North Carolina to Colorado for about $100. So air travel has become fairly inexpensive, but the argument is that every time we fly, every time we go places, we're increasing our carbon footprint. So a carbon passport would then limit the amount that you can choose to just jump on a plane and go somewhere, right? Now, the other thing that I think is interesting about this, and I don't know if you guys ever watch Doug and Stacy. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And it's nothing against them. Sometimes they have some interesting things, sometimes they don't. But Doug put up a video a couple days ago really getting into the whole ignition switch kill situation.
All right, guys, we're going to get right into it. If I was going to fundamentally change America, one of the things I would definitely have to do is mess with the automobiles. Right? Because America loves the automobile. It is bred into us, the ability that we can get in our vehicles and drive from Boston, Massachusetts, all the way to California with a few tanks full of gas, cross that whole great big country. Well, that's a problem. Okay, your mobility is a problem. Guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States of America, but soon to be disrupted. So here we go. We're going to get right into it. I ran across Survival Lily. She's a friend of our channel here. We've known her for quite a while. And she was talking about a message or a comment that she got from one of her subscribers. Okay? Now, I'm going to read you this comment. Well, parts of it. I'm not going to read the whole comment to you. But I want you to let this sink in. Okay? Because this is where they're going with this stuff. Okay? Also, if you're in America right now, I want you to think about, they just passed the law, before I get into this, they just passed the law that all cars have to have kill switches on them by like 2025 or something like that. My date might be wrong, but my information is correct, okay? Kill switches, mandatory, all vehicles, even Republicans voted for it. And I stress that because, you would almost think that the left would vote for some control mechanisms like that under the guise of safety.
And basically what that is there's a regulation that's being passed that says that by 2026, cars must have a kill switch installed in them. Now, this kill switch, according to USA Today fact checkers, which I love reading their fact checking because it just constantly sways things and is never actually factual, But according to them, this would not be used by law enforcement agencies or anything, etc. It would just be used by a federal agency to determine if you're drunk driving or not and shut down the car. So what this kill switch is going to do is it's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to monitor your driving and how you're driving. Now, somebody who is texting and driving could be confused for a drunk driver. Heck, I was confused for a drunk driver and had to go through this massive, DUI check and Tetons for, swerving a little bit, as I pointed out, wildlife to my kids, driving below the speed limit in a national park, which, they should be going after the people speeding in national parks. But, everybody, if you've been to a national park, they're all over the road. They're all over the place. And maybe I should have been paying a little more attention to the lines. I think what it was that they wanted to pull somebody over and make a scene about it because it was going into a holiday weekend and they just wanted to make their presence known. I kind of felt like it was harassment because clearly I had been doing nothing. But my point is that these sensors are supposed to detect driving that would mimic a drunk driver, and then this federal agency has the ability to shut down the car, basically with a kill switch. On the surface, this sounds wonderful, especially to mad mothers, because the fact is that drunk driving is not something we should take lightly in this country. It is something that has claimed a lot of lives, created a lot of damage. It's a much bigger problem than some of the other things that our politicians choose to focus on. But at the same time, having a driving monitoring system in somebody's vehicle is a huge violation of their privacy and their rights. And then on top of it, having a kill switch to shut it off, I think it oversteps the bounds and definitely goes beyond anything that could possibly be used for good. And then when you get into this concept of carbon passports, and you've already developed this technology to go into people's cars, you're already tracking where they go, how far they've gone, where they are. Why not just take it a step further as we declare war on carbon, which we essentially have? I mean, President Biden hasn't come out and said it, but if you guys were paying attention last month, he enacted wartime laws, benefits, and things given to the president to use in extreme situations in order to supply multi-billion-dollar companies with a couple $100 million to manufacture more electrical appliances and things in the name of climate change. So he's using a wartime tool to combat his version of climate change, or his handlers' versions, whoever it is that's actually doing things there. So my point is that if you have this device in the cars that can be utilized in one capacity, why not just go ahead and utilize it in other capacities?
And here we are. But here we go. Many people don't see or understand what will happen to us with the great digitalization revolution, especially the possible dangers and misuse. Here's a small excerpt of a pilot project we are working on. Okay, this guy's in Germany, already working on the project. I told you guys, behind the scenes, they are working like dogs to implement this as fast as they can because we're waking up faster than they can implement it. Here we go. Topic: digitalized car. Pilot project's already underway. They've been telling you guys for a couple years now. They want these autonomous cars to be driving you around. Okay, here we go. In the next 10 years, you will no longer be possible to insure old cars, gas cars, okay? You will be forced to buy a digital car, otherwise you won't get insurance. And then you notice too, like this is the long game, they pass these laws in every state where you have to have insurance to drive. So there's going to be a rubber hits the road moment. Either we stop the nonsense, or a bunch of people are going to be driving gas cars black market style.
You don't want to do it right away, or everybody is going to say, no, that's bad. But if you say it's to stop people from drinking and driving and breaking the law, you all of a sudden have some people complying with it and saying, oh, this isn't so bad. So then we get it in the cars, we get it moving forward. And then, down the road with carbon passports, we say, you know what, this is bad. We need to limit people's driving, okay? So we're going to say, after you've hit your monthly carbon credit, boom, you're shut down. Now that could be a problem too for families that share a car. Like in our family, We have a farm truck, which is kind of my primary vehicle, but I don't go very far. I don't, I don't like going places unless, we do it as a family for work. And that's, if you watch our channel, we do that. We have a single family car. Excuse the dogs. We have a single family car that we utilize for almost everything. And so, that would be like taking everybody's carbon credits and combining it into one vehicle that has that sensor on it. I'm just gonna fix that real quick because they knocked it. So I'm curious what you guys think about those two things. If you think that the ignition switch is opening the door to a larger problem, and what do you think is going to happen in the future there? To me, it's a bit scary. All this technology we're putting into things is a bit scary, and I don't mean to sound scared, but anyway. So this whole carbon thing also brings me to my next topic, and just so you guys know, I always put these topics broken up in the bottom of the video so you can scroll through and just listen to the topics that you want to hear. So the UN is making another big push against meat in Western countries, specifically the Americas. And basically, you're probably thinking, well, they've been against you eating meat for a while, Charlie. What's new here? So I'll tell you what's new. The food system emissions deserve a place at the top of the table alongside energy and transport, as they represent an estimated third of greenhouse gas emissions and 40% of methane. Investors hope for the first ever publication of a food and agricultural roadmap at COP28 this month, which will catalyze the transition to 1.5 degrees and a more sustainable food system. Now, number one, the issue that I have with a lot of these things at these UN summits and stuff is that there are certain administrations that take these as treaties with the UN and all these other countries and really take them seriously. And then there are some presidents who don't take them as treaties, and they shouldn't, because unless our Congress and Senate vote on it, we should not be following the recommendations of the UN. But once the UN puts these publications out, they put a roadmap out. That roadmap is to eliminate the amount of meat that we eat as consumers. So I thought it would be a little interesting because I have always disagreed with this particular point of the UN. In fact, back, I don't know if it was 2016, somewhere in that period of time, I remember going to a local burger joint with my family, homemade burger joint, not like a fast food place or something like that. And I remember sitting there was TV on the background, and the UN was coming out with this big push against meat and how bad it is for our climate and how bad it is for this, that, and the other thing. And I thought, this is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. And I'm going to explain to you why in a second, but it is absolutely ridiculous. And as time went by and we wanted to figure out, another avenue to do things and occupy our time, my wife really always liked the concept of doing something that was a nonprofit, something that was just focused on fulfilling the purpose of a cause. And I said to her, well, what about, you've got all these groups that are coming out with videos of explaining how bad farming is and this, that, and the other thing, and how bad meat is. And they're very well funded, right? Why don't we start a nonprofit that goes around, films farms, tells the truth about agriculture, and really shares with society all the great things that agriculture has to offer, including animal agriculture? Because the fact is, and this is a fact, that if you remove the animals from the land, you have more environmental degradation than you do with them on the land. And in the U.S., and this is, an example, according to federal reports from our government, the government that goes along with a lot of this stuff, according to their reports, U.S. agriculture makes up 10% of total emissions from the United States. 10%. Okay, that's 1.4% of global emissions. And then when you break it down to how much of that is actually caused by animal agriculture or eating meat, it's even less than that. In other words, you stopping eating meat is going to do absolutely nothing for the climate. There's got to be another agenda behind this. And I've voiced my opinion on what that is in the past. I'm curious, today we can discuss it in the comments below on what your opinion is on it. But I do not think any logical person, and believe it or not, I do think that these people are logical and educated, would actually believe that trying to reduce a sector that makes up less than the 1.4% of global emissions is actually going to make a dang difference. So there's another objective in there, and I think that objective can be taken down many different rabbit holes. In my personal perspective, I think that when you shut down farming, when you shut down the productivity of our private lands, you eventually create a shift towards public lands, public land ownership. And I think that is what this is all about. And I've posted some videos in the past on this conversation, and it's just an opinion. You can disagree with me. Maybe you think it's something else. Maybe you think that animals really have something bad to do with it. But that's, something that you'll find from watching our bison documentary when it comes out, is that number one, there were far more ruminants. And I'm not just talking about bison. I'm talking about elk. I'm talking about antelope. I'm talking about deer. I'm talking about wild ruminants on the face of this earth before we ever came in with cows. Okay? If you think about all the land that has been developed, that none of these animals are even on now. All of the cropland that none of these animals are even on now used to be filled with these types of animals. And then you're going to say that they're causing, ruminants are causing too much methane emissions. Think about it. So, something I would like to do, I've been thinking, and I'll move on to the other subject in just a second, but something that I've been wanting to do is I've been trying to figure out, what are my next steps? God, because I've been led to do a lot of different things over the years. I can't just do nonprofit work forever. I've got to maintain something for my family. And, we have, through our work with the nonprofit, we've made a lot of great connections across the states, across North America, Canada, everywhere, really, that are ethically raising animals. And nothing against CAFOs. I understand the purpose that they serve in feeding a population, all of those things. And I understand that there are some CAFOs that could be run very diligently, very cleanly. But I like the concept, the whole ecosystem concept of regenerative agriculture, something that I believe in. I'm a very natural person. Now, I'm not like Wrangler Star. I don't go walking around barefoot everywhere. Maybe when I'm a millionaire, I will. But I really like the concept of taking everything into account when you are raising animals, when you are growing food, and the nutritional, the nutrition behind those foods is, you can't even compare it. So thinking along those lines, something that I would like to do, and I'd like to start this pretty soon, is I would like to set up a meat company that helps bring more of that meat to consumers like you guys. So what I'll probably do is kind of start off with products that are easily shippable, and then, as we develop, move it into bigger stages where we can, and try and, make it affordable as well. A lot of when things are raised correctly, it is a little more expensive than what you probably are used to buying at the grocery store. But so not that I, am doing this specifically to go against the United Nations, but I believe in the concept of meat. I believe in the concept of ethically raised meat, and I'd like to be able to make that more available to people, and I'd like to help the producers that are doing it, because I think I can do that. I think that we've built a lot of great connections on the supply side, and I think that we've built a lot of connections even on the marketing side to kind of help, help this movement along. And like I said, it's not that I have anything against, a lot of these other groups. It's just I prefer things a certain way, and I'd like to bring that full circle. So I think that, with this meat issue, the other thing is that you're seeing consolidation. And a lot of people ask me, what is wrong with market consolidation? And the very end of this video, I'm going to discuss exactly what's happening with industry consolidation and why I disagree with it. But the point is that you're seeing a lot of consolidation. Now, a lot of farmers have always relied upon kind of the big meat packers to deliver their product. They take their product, they sell it to a feedlot, or they run their product through a feedlot and get a share of, the weight gain, etc. And then it moves on to the big meat packers, and the big meat packers are the ones who bring the product to you, and that's essentially what I want to do, is I want to bring the product to you, and while bypassing some of that stuff. So basically, what we've seen in recent years is we've seen the meat packers shutting down a lot of their facilities. It started during COVID. It hasn't stopped. And if anything, it's increased since that time frame. And the more of these processing facilities they shut down, the more small farms they shut down. In the chicken industry, the chicken houses, they rely on their local meat packing plants to buy their chickens. Without them, their whole system doesn't work. And because they've relied on it for so long, they have nowhere to go. They have no idea how to market those animals, how to move those animals. They have no idea of how to do it other than raising cheap chickens. And that's kind of the reality that we're in. But most of these farmers are getting to the age anyway now where they're just saying, all right, I'm just going to retire. I'm going to sell it all. I'm going to retire. The chicken houses might not be worth anything because there's no packing plant in town anymore, but the land's still worth something. And that's what you're going to start seeing over the next couple of years. As this consolidation continues, if you look at companies like Tyson, for example, Tyson just invested in one of the largest bug plants in the country, and I believe it's for animal feed. But these technologies always step up into the next product, consumer feed, right? So we're kind of cutting back on the meat supply by cutting back on our processing facilities, and a lot of that too. I mean, with the cattle industry, for example, you actually do have a very large reduction in herd size right now compared to the demand. And so a lot of that has to do with that as well. I mean, if they don't have enough product coming in, they're going to shut down the facility. I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense for them to keep it open, but they are moving investments into alternative meats, alternative proteins, and that's where a lot of their big bucks are going. They're not investing in the traditional proteins anymore. They're kind of letting it as it falter. So as you see more consolidation in the food sector, that has always raised a question for me, because food is something that we all eat, we all need, right? We all have to have it. The more choices we have on where that comes from, the more personal freedom we have in making decisions on what we eat. The less choices we have, the less freedoms we have. And that brings me down to the banking sector, because I think that the banking sector is one that we've seen a lot of consolidation in over the years. And just like food, I mean, finances, currency, and control over currency, those are two very big important pieces of our personal freedoms. Because when you go to a bank, think about that relationship you have with the bank. That bank controls your debit account for you. And I say control because they control how often your card is swiped, whether or not you can take it in and out of the country, how much your maximum deposits are, how much your maximum transactions are. Everything is governed by the bank that you choose. And right now you can look at all the different bank policies and you can choose where to go, right? There's lots of banks. You can choose where to go. If you don't like somebody's policies, then you can say, well, screw you. I'm going over here to this guy because I like their policies better. But either way, those banks govern how your cash flow works, whether you realize it or not. And then when it comes to getting credit from the bank, getting a mortgage from the bank, we have one particular bank, it's a regional bank. We have a lot of things with mortgages, checking accounts, savings, and it's because we've developed a good relationship with that bank. We've had another bank, we've always tried to spread ourselves out a little bit, but we've had another bank that was recently listed, and this is what re-spurred this thought for me. It was an article that came out that was talking about 3 regional banks that are, in their words, the next to be taken over. But in other words, the next 3 biggest ones that are going to fail. And the bank that we just left is in that top 3. They were going to be bought out by TD. That fell through, probably because I'm pretty sure that these banks are not liquid. I'm pretty sure that these banks don't have enough assets to cover their debts, because if you watch my last video, the deposit outflows from small banks have been huge. And I'm a big proponent of sticking with the small guys, not going to the national guys. We're still with the regional guy, but I'm paying closer attention to the financial worthiness of those regional guys. And I think that what we're seeing in banks, the consolidation, the takeover of banks, is something that's been in play for a very, very long time. I mean, this goes back before the 2008 financial crisis. The whole too big to fail thing almost spurred more of what we're seeing going on now than I think anybody expected it would. Well, okay, wouldn't say anybody, but this goes all the way back to the savings and loans crisis, to the creation of the central bank. Heck, we could even throw the Titanic in there if you wanted to, if you really wanted to talk about some conspiracy theories. But the point is that there's been this agenda to centralize control of financial resources for quite some time. And you don't even have to centralize it anymore. You just have to get it down to a controlling handful. And they're almost there. I think there's still too much out there, but they're almost there. And with the proper regulation in place, proper regulation in food industry and meat processing plants, with the proper regulations in place, you can prevent a whole lot of new competition from coming in, and it helps, kind of consolidate even more. Okay, so let's get into Lady Rothschild's Pinky in the Brain plan to take over the world. Right? We've all heard about the Rothschild family, and this is the Rothschild family. And one of the biggest conspiracy theories in floating the internet is that they control global capitalism. They control everything. And so it's kind of ironic that during COVID, when we were all paying attention to the WEF and all of these global institutions, that a lot of people missed out on the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, which is started and run by Lady Rothschild. Now, this particular organization pushes, well, just what it says, Council for Inclusive Capitalism. What is inclusive capitalism? Well, capitalism comes in many different shapes and forms, right? The new president of Argentina identifies himself with, sorry, I had to look at it again, anarcho-capitalism. Okay, so what is anarcho-capitalism? Is it anarchy? In an ironic form, what he's not proposing is anarchy, government anarchy, etc. What he's proposing is almost what I would simplify as the freest form of free market capitalism. Complete exit from government involvement, no central bank. As consumers and business owners, we define the market, we define how the market is regulated, with our spending dollars, with everything else. And to me, when I think of free market capitalism, which is a form of capitalism that I've always been drawn in the direction of, I think that a lot of his concepts are very good. In some instances, I think that they go a little far, but he's not going to be able to implement everything under the sun. I think it's actually very good for Argentina, which has traditionally been a very socialist economy, to have somebody come in and start enacting these policies of separating the government from everybody's business, right? I mean, and the reality is, I mean, this is something that I find interesting, and some of you don't like Trump. I don't have an opinion on him as a politician really myself. But he's been held up in court in New York for overstating his net worth when applying for a loan. And I've found this case interesting because I've spent many years in commercial real estate, and we would finance properties, and you'd always put your best foot forward, right? When you submitted for a loan, you always put your best foot forward as far as representation of rent rolls, etc. And generally, unless you're lying about your rent rolls, unless you're lying about your leases, unless you paid off an appraisal, it's nearly impossible to commit fraud, because the bank is going to send in their own appraiser to determine for the bank what it's actually worth. I mean, they'll take into consideration everything that you're saying, but they make up their own mind. And that's something that we've seen again and again in this case. In his financial figures, at the beginning of it is a disclosure that says these are our opinion of financial value, which financial value is always an opinion, right? You can think your home is worth $1 million, but it hits the market and sells for $750,000. Does that make you a fraudster for thinking your home was worth $250,000 more than the market was willing to pay for it? What dictated the market was what somebody else was willing to pay for it, right? And so when you're looking at valuations of things, it is actually impossible to know exactly what the valuation of a property will be, because you don't know exactly what somebody else will pay for it until you put it on the market and try and sell it. So in these type of valuations, what people are doing is they're trying to determine what is it worth. And the bank determined, well, we're going to value everything at half of what Trump said, but we're still going to give him the loan. And I'm still wondering, because you have the disclosure on the front. We all know how business operates, how banks operate, how valuations are done. We all know that they're a matter of opinion. Without having paid off an appraiser, or without having lied on rent rolls, you would think that those would be the pieces of evidence that they would bring out in this case. It's not any of the evidence that they brought out at all. In fact, all they've said was that he overstated his net worth, which he was overstating his own brand value. I don't know anybody else who's done that, do you? Anyway, didn't mean to get off on a tangent on that. But the point is that capitalism is dictated by markets, dictated by opinions, dictated by, free market capitalism. It's one of the greatest things that, in my perspective, that's ever existed. And business relationships are between you and I, or between other people, we don't need the government involved in all of that, right? I mean, I realize they need to collect their taxes so they can pay for other people. But the point is that those are primarily private relationships. I think we've entered a phase in the life cycle of mankind that's a very dangerous phase, where we say that we need the government to overlook everything that we do and protect us from making bad business decisions. But anyway, so what is inclusive capitalism? Inclusive capitalism is almost the polar opposite of anarcho-capitalism. Inclusive capitalism looks to consolidate the industries to a few solid corporations that then can work with governments for the betterment of humanity in a virtuous way. Okay, so I'm going to read to you real quick what they say the organization is all about, and then I'm going to read to you some of the things some critics say, and we can discuss it. So they say that capitalism has delivered wealth and prosperity to billions of people around the world. However, we recognize that capitalism must evolve to promote a more sustainable, trusted, equitable, and inclusive system that works for everyone. This is especially important in these days of unprecedented technological advancement, climate disruption, public health crisis, and social unrest. The Council recognizes the need for determined actions by its members and others working with them to achieve these aspirations for capitalism. Now, I'd like to just point out here that technical advancement, climate disruption, public health, and social unrest are all actions that empower their mission statement. So from a critic standpoint, this mission statement is rather familiar. as it echoes the goals of the WEF and its concept of the shared economy, a system in which you will own nothing, have no privacy, borrow everything, be completely reliant on the government for your survival, and you will like it. I don't think that, inclusive capitalism is really that far off from what we're hearing from the WEF. Now, Lady Rothschild has suggested dropping the concept of ESG from the dialogue, but she's just talking about rebranding it.
I think it goes some way in mitigating the backlash that ESG has suffered from over the last year or so. Especially when Larry Fink says ESG has been weaponized. And I'm sure that's an area of concern for you, because we were just about gathering momentum on the issue of inclusive capitalism, and suddenly financiers and banks and investors all over the world thought that it was going too far. How do you see that backlash play out?
So I believe that ESG as a term should be put into the dustbin.
Okay.
I don't think we should try to defend ESG as a term, because it's been sullied by, it's been productized by too many people. There's too much greenwashing around it. There's too much virtue signaling. And people just think if they hang up an ESG shingle that they are a virtuous company. And I would throw that in the dustbin. And what I would do is I would go back to a narrative for the public about, let's look at what great companies in history did to become great. Whether it was, AT&T, or here in India, ITC 2.5 decades ago. They looked at how are we treating our people? How are we treating the planet? And so I would say that what we should do is we should say that business at its best has always been in the business of providing the best products to their consumers, built and designed by people who loved the product, who loved the company, who were fairly compensated, who lived, and businesses that lived in communities where the business was an integral part of that community. And doing all of those things creates more valuable companies. It's been shown over and over again. So I would lose ESG, but I would really bear down on what are companies doing to profitably solve the problems of people and planet. And I would do that as an investor, I would do that as an employee, I would do that as a board member, I would do that as a journalist. Companies that are profiting while at the same time ruining people's lives or ruining the planet, those are not long-term keepers. Those are the companies that should fall off, down by the wayside. We should elevate. We sometimes at the Council for Inclusive Capitalism call it a race to the top. We should invest in and work for companies that are taking care of people and planet.
What she's doing is acknowledging, okay, well, this isn't convincing consumers, so we're going to go back to convincing them that corporations should just be simply acting in the best interest of everybody, because that's what gives them the best products. And I agree with some of that statement. I agree that if you're going to run a business, you need to be involved in your community. I agree that if you're going to run a business, you need to be offering products to people that are bettering your consumers. Otherwise, why would people buy your products? I mean, these are fundamental business things that most people understand, right? If you were to go out as a business and not take those things into consideration, you would most likely fail. So where this goes a step further, and where inclusive capitalism goes a step further, is, where they're trying to utilize those selling points to push a uniformity of virtue, a uniformity of morality on the consumers that the businesses service. They don't want you to have a choice at the end of the day. They want to be able to inflict that upon you. And they also are using this agenda of inclusive capitalism It's basically another word for socialism, communism, and all of those types of things that we've all, over the years, as we get to understand what the terms actually mean, we've kind of all said no, heck no, right? Because the reality is at the end of the day, if these plans actually transpired to their fullest potential, there would always be a button pusher, right? A button pusher that says, this is what's virtuous, this is what you should be doing. And if we completely transitioned into a direction of being complacent to this, the average everyday person would have nothing more than the other person around them. There would be no incentive for productivity. There'd be no incentive for economic growth because everything's inclusive, right? And you have these large corporations that are now controlling everything, that are making the decisions for you, what's virtuous for you, what's not virtuous for you. So while the intentions on the surface look good, and I don't know, maybe she thinks she's doing good, at the end of the day, the direction in which inclusive capitalism is going is not so good at all.
Because how do we call a liberal? Someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
The basic root function of the council is to centralize most or all major corporations. That is market consolidation, corporations with global influence, and join them with governments into a network that places ideology over profit motive. And again, ideology. Whose ideology? Does it mean that you necessarily agree with that? Do you think that if their ideologies are that we eat less meat and we eat more bugs, that you're okay with that? Do you think that their sources of energy are necessarily the best sources for your circumstances, for your family? Are they the most reliable? These are all questions that we have. So when you get into this type of capitalism, it is a form of control, a form of taking over the lives of the masses without the masses really realizing it. And to me, it's cloaked with all of this goodness. Now, like I said, they may feel it's good. There may be people out there that think that this form of capitalism is good. And I would encourage a debate on this, because I think when we pick it apart to specific scenarios, when I do it, and in conversations I've had with other people, what it always comes down to is that free market capitalism tends to be the best solution. Why are we so fixated on trying to change that? And why is it the richest people in the world, people who have never had to actually earn their fortune, are the ones who are coming up with this? I mean, remember, Lady Rothschild, she hasn't had to earn her fortune. She's sitting at the top of a helm, offering advice, giving guidance on how to run businesses when her business was built for her.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm trying to understand, though, about how this would work is one of the great worries about AI technology is there are obviously the safety issues and misinformation and all of that, but also what it's going to ultimately do to the economy. Now, some people think it's going to supercharge the economy and make it much more productive, but by the way, much more productive might leave even more people behind. So the question is, how can the technology itself or the companies that are operating these businesses make it more inclusive for more people if, in fact, we think that what it's ultimately meant to do is make people more productive, but that means less jobs?
That's why, Andrew, I'm saying we have to think about our essential social compact with society, that it's not about productivity, about privacy, about any of these very important issues, but what is our foundational belief? King Charles made the Mansion speech this week, 2 weeks ago. And in it, he said, have we asked about our responsibilities to each other and to our communities? That's where we have to begin. And then we will deal with how do we make our society more productive with all of the magnificent benefits that there will be from AI, but take care of the people who are not part of it? Do we create more jobs for carers? Do we change our economic incentives so we're no longer giving deductions for carried interest, but we're giving deductions to companies who create gain sharing for workers? There are so many changes. That's why I'm saying it's a root and branch reform of the economy, and there's no better place to start than with AI, since AI is going to be this
Lady Lynn,
amazing, magical.
If I was going to put AI at something to highlight, with 50 or 60% of college kids thinking that maybe socialism is a more effective economic model than capitalism, I would point that lens that you want to focus on the shortcomings of capitalism on the de facto shortcomings of socialism and the shift that we're seeing. And we don't need, I don't think, people pointing out more that, oh, well, you don't do this because of capitalism. We don't do that. Why don't you try to educate the college kids that socialism and the drift into what you're proposing is the real danger at what we're looking at, not nitpicking some of the things in capitalism that might cause people to feel an us versus them. The best way to prosperity is free market capitalism. Why don't you try and get the 60% of college kids that think socialism is a viable alternative and crush that notion?
Joe, you and I are on the same exact page. What I am talking about is saving capitalism. We are on the same page.
Capitalism's fine,
I never
Lady
said
Lynn.
that to you before.
That's why people come here. No one's trying to get in there.
But
no one's trying to get to places where they're socialist. That's why they want to come here. I mean, you can work around it on the edges, Lady Lynn.
60%.
Go ahead.
This isn't the edges. I'm talking about root and branch reform. That's 60% of young people. You cannot take that fact for granted. That is saying something to you. Your idea of free market capitalism
we need some new professors that don't
really
preach anti-Semitism and that don't.
People.
We've got to root out a lot of them.
Lady Lynn, the other thing that I just wanted to ask you about is you've been talking for many years, and we've had you on the broadcast a bunch before about the idea of inclusive capitalism. But one of the things that's happened, and you and I have talked about this, I think, on TV and off air as well, is the backlash that has come from companies doing anything more, frankly, than focusing on profits, right? I mean, we've seen what's happened even the last several years around different companies that have spoken out on either spoken out on different issues or tried to readjust their business models. And what's happened? We've either seen politicians come and there's been a backlash, or in some cases, shareholders have come and so with a backlash. And so the question is sort of, how do you even begin to do this?
Well, I think begin is the point. That's why I'm saying we have to have a declaration where business and government together make a joint statement to the public about why capitalism, understood to be for all the people, is the best system in the world. And that's not free market alone. It's free market that's dictated by, as Adam Smith said, morality and ethics. And that's all I'm asking for.
In a stakeholder corporation, the executive is no longer in charge of building assets for their principal. Instead of being driven by progress in services and goods and products that they're making, they're driven by what's best for humanity, what's best for the community. Now we are taking those elite businessmen and we are saying, you are now a legislator, you are now a tax receiver and a benefitter, you're an executive, and you're a jurist, because you are the one who is judging what is best for humanity and making the decisions. Their main focus is to take private income, private shareholders' money. You extort from your shareholders and reinvest it into society to foster their social objectives, because that's the virtuous thing to do. Now you have a corporation deciding what society should be. They have to determine what the rules are of society, what is acceptable in society, what is ethical in society. In a private shareholder corporation, they don't determine that. Society determines that, and they do what they can to be attractive to that society. Whereas in a stakeholder economy, the corporation makes those decisions. They decide what is best for society. They decide how to spend the shareholders' money back to the community. They decide what is acceptable in the community. And what's not acceptable in community, they don't support. What's not acceptable in the community, they don't publish on their platforms. They're the ones deciding how we perceive each other, how we perceive societal norms. The shareholder corporation, they don't have that much power because what they have is a product and a corporation that they have to market to the community. But the biggest question that I think you need to ask yourself is, are these corporations, are these individuals virtuous? And if they are virtuous, whose virtues? Yours? Mine? Are they respecting your religious beliefs? Is that a part of this? Are they respecting your family, your heritage, where you've come from? Are they respecting your investments, your retirement accounts? Well, they aren't, because all of those things are independently yours. One has to ask at some point where true responsibility lies.
And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else?
Anyway, those are the type of conversations that I wanted to have today, and maybe you guys have some good comments. We'll see as this thing unfolds here. And, you know, until next time, you know, let me know what you guys think about this format. If you found it more engaging, if you think that it's a better way of doing things, and, you know, I can't guarantee that every As a Man Thinketh will be like this, but we'll definitely try and do a couple more of these in the future and just see, you know, see how it works out with everybody. Till next time, be safe, stay objective, and think through some of these things that are thrown at you with beautiful rainbow-colored cloaks.